The first time Ethan Whitmore saw Noah Bennett again, he almost convinced himself he was only remembering a ghost. 7 years had passed, yet one look across the crowded farmer's market was enough to bring back every forgotten feeling he had buried beneath years of silence. Noah stood beneath the warm afternoon sun, holding a paper bag filled with fresh bread, his light brown hair moving gently in the breeze, his familiar blue eyes fixed on something across the street. For a moment, Ethan forgot how to breathe. The world around him faded into distant sounds of conversation, footsteps, and passing cars. There was only Noah, the person he had loved, the person who had disappeared without a goodbye. Then Noah turned. Their eyes met, and the expression on his face was not happiness. It was fear. Before Ethan could take a single step forward, Noah lowered his gaze, turned away, and walked in the opposite direction. That was the moment Ethan understood something that hurt more than the years apart. Noah was still running from him. 7 years ago, Ethan had believed Noah left because their love had become too difficult. He had believed the quiet messages stopped because Noah no longer cared. He had believed the empty apartment, the unanswered calls, and the final letter with only a few painful words were proof that their story was over. But seeing Noah again awakened a question Ethan had never been able to silence. Why would someone who loved him so deeply choose to disappear? Ethan still remembered the beginning. Before the silence, before the distance, before the world convinced Noah that their happiness was something to hide. They had met during a summer when everything felt possible. Ethan was 25, working at his family's bookstore in a small town outside Portland, Oregon. Noah was a university student who visited every weekend, always carrying too many books and apologizing every time he stayed too long. They were different in every way. Ethan was confident, patient, and protective. Noah was thoughtful, gentle, and always worried about disappointing others. Somehow, those differences brought them closer. Ethan saw the kindness Noah tried to hide. Noah saw the loneliness Ethan never showed anyone. Together, they created a quiet world where they could simply be themselves. But not everyone saw their happiness the way they did. When Noah's family discovered the truth about their relationship, the warmth they once shared was replaced by cold conversations and painful expectations. Noah was told that the love he felt was wrong. He was told that walking away was the only way to protect his future. And slowly, those words became a weight he carried every day. Ethan never knew about those moments. He only knew the result. The person who once promised to stay had vanished. Now, after 7 years, Noah was standing only a few hundred feet away, alive, changed, and still carrying secrets. Ethan watched him disappear into the crowd again. But this time he refused to let the story end with another unanswered goodbye. Because deep inside, Ethan knew one thing. Some people run because they stop loving you. But others run because loving you became the hardest thing they ever had to do. The days after seeing Noah again felt strangely familiar to Ethan Whitmore, as if the past had opened a door he had spent years trying to keep closed. He returned to his apartment in Portland, Oregon, but the quiet rooms no longer felt peaceful. Every corner reminded him of a life that had once felt complete. There was the old wooden shelf where Noah used to organize his favorite novels. There was the small coffee mug Noah had left behind, the one Ethan never had the heart to throw away. For 7 years, Ethan had told himself that memories were all he had left. But now Noah was no longer just a memory. He was real. He was nearby, and he was still carrying the same sadness in his eyes. Ethan spent the next morning walking through the town where they had once built their dreams. The bookstore where they first met was still standing, with the same blue sign above the entrance and the same quiet atmosphere inside. Ethan remembered the first time Noah had walked through those doors. Noah had been searching for a rare history book, but he had accidentally picked up a poetry collection instead. Ethan had smiled and offered to help him find the right one. Noah had laughed softly and admitted he was too embarrassed to ask because he thought he should have known the difference. It was a small moment, almost forgettable to anyone else, but to Ethan it became the beginning of something unforgettable. Back then, their happiness had been simple. They shared coffee on rainy mornings, walked through neighborhood streets after work, and talked about the future as if nothing could ever separate them. Noah dreamed of becoming a teacher. Ethan dreamed of expanding the family bookstore into a place where everyone felt welcome. They were not perfect, but they understood each other in a way that made the world feel less lonely. Then everything changed. Ethan still remembered the evening Noah became distant. There was no argument, no dramatic goodbye, just a quiet sadness that appeared in Noah's voice whenever they spoke. Ethan had asked if something was wrong, but Noah always answered the same way. He said everything was fine. Ethan knew it was not true. He could feel Noah slowly slipping away, but he never understood why. Now, after seeing Noah again, Ethan wondered how much pain Noah had hidden during those final weeks. He wondered how many times Noah had wanted to stay but convinced himself that leaving was the only choice. Across town, Noah sat alone in his small apartment, looking at an old photograph of the two of them. His life had changed in many ways, but that one memory remained untouched. He remembered Ethan's kindness. He remembered feeling accepted for the first time in his life. But he also remembered the pressure, the expectations, and the fear that followed after people discovered the truth about his relationship. Noah had not left because his feelings disappeared. He left because he believed staying would bring more pain to the person he loved. For years, he carried the belief that distance was a sacrifice he had to make. But seeing Ethan again forced him to face a question he had avoided for a long time. If love was truly something wrong, why did losing it feel like losing the most important part of himself? For 7 years, Noah Bennett had carried the same memory with him, not as a beautiful reminder, but as a question he never knew how to answer. He often wondered if there was a different choice he could have made. If he had been stronger, if he had spoken louder, if he had refused to listen to the voices that told him his happiness was impossible. But every time those thoughts appeared, he remembered Ethan Whitmore standing in front of him with hope in his eyes, believing they could face anything together. That was the part Noah could never forget. Ethan had always believed in them. Noah was the one who stopped believing. After seeing Ethan again, Noah found himself returning to places he had avoided for years. The small coffee shop near his apartment, the quiet streets where they used to walk after long days, the park bench where Ethan once told him that a peaceful life with the right person was worth more than any achievement. Those memories felt close enough to touch, yet far enough away to hurt. Noah had built a new life in Seattle, Washington, but he never truly escaped the past. He worked as an elementary school teacher, surrounded by children who reminded him every day that kindness could change someone's life. His students saw him as someone patient and understanding, but they never knew the reason he valued compassion so deeply. They never knew he had once needed someone to show him the same kindness. Meanwhile, Ethan continued searching for answers. He did not want to force Noah into a conversation before he was ready, but he could not accept another silence between them. After 7 years of wondering, he needed to understand what had really happened. One evening, Ethan found Noah's address through an old mutual friend. He stood outside the apartment building for several minutes, unsure if he should knock. The confident man who once faced every challenge without hesitation suddenly felt uncertain. He was not afraid of rejection. He was afraid of discovering that Noah truly wanted a life without him. When Noah finally opened the door, neither of them spoke at first. The silence between them carried 7 years of unanswered questions. Ethan looked at Noah and saw the same person he remembered, but with a sadness that had not been there before. Noah looked at Ethan and saw someone who had waited far longer than he ever deserved. "Why did you leave?" Ethan finally asked. His voice was calm, but the pain behind those words was impossible to hide. Noah looked away. For years, he had prepared himself for this moment, but no answer felt enough. "Because I thought it was the only way to protect you," Noah whispered. Ethan felt those words more deeply than he expected. Protect him? All these years, he believed Noah had abandoned him. He believed their love had simply become something Noah no longer wanted. But now, for the first time, another possibility appeared. Maybe Noah was not running away from him. Maybe Noah was running from everything that made him feel like he had to choose between love and belonging. Noah finally looked back at him. "I wanted to stay, Ethan. Every single day, I wanted to stay. But I was told that loving you would only bring pain to both of us." The room became quiet again. But this time, the silence felt different. It was no longer a wall between them. It was the beginning of the truth finally coming into the light. Noah Bennett had imagined this conversation many times during the 7 years he spent away from Ethan Whitmore. In those dreams, he always knew the right words to say. He imagined himself explaining everything clearly, without hesitation, without fear. But standing in front of Ethan's apartment door, Hearing the quiet disappointment in Ethan's voice, Noah realized that some memories were much heavier when they became real. Ethan invited him inside, and for a moment, Noah felt like he had stepped back into a life he once lost. The apartment was different from the home they had shared in his memories, but there were small details that reminded him of Ethan's personality. The carefully arranged books on the shelf, the warm light from the kitchen, the simple comfort of a place where someone had spent years building a life alone. Noah sat quietly while Ethan prepared 2 cups of coffee, just like he used to. It was such an ordinary gesture, yet it made Noah's heart ache because it reminded him of how much time had passed. "I need to understand," Ethan said softly, as he placed the coffee on the table. "I spent years thinking I meant nothing to you. I thought you looked at everything we had and decided it was not worth fighting for." Noah lowered his eyes. Those words hurt because they were the exact opposite of the truth. "You were never the reason I left," Noah answered. "You were the reason I stayed as long as I did." Ethan looked at him, confused. Noah took a slow breath and began telling the story he had kept hidden for years. After their relationship became known, his family did not understand. They saw their love through the lens of fear and tradition. They worried about what people would say, how others would judge them, and what kind of future Noah could have if he continued choosing his own path. Every conversation became another reminder that the world around him was not ready to accept what made him happy. Noah remembered sitting alone in his childhood home, staring out the window while hearing people talk about his future as if his own feelings did not matter. He remembered being told that love was supposed to follow certain rules. He remembered feeling as if he had to choose between the person who made him feel understood and the people who raised him. But the hardest part was not the pressure itself. The hardest part was watching Ethan become affected by it. Noah believed that if he stayed, Ethan would spend his life fighting battles that were never his to carry. So Noah made the choice that broke his own heart. He left before Ethan could sacrifice everything for him. Ethan listened without interrupting. For 7 years, he had carried the pain of believing he was abandoned. But now he finally understood that Noah had been carrying a different kind of pain. "You should have told me," Ethan said quietly. Noah nodded. "I know. I was afraid." "Afraid of me?" Ethan asked. Noah immediately shook his head. "Never. I was afraid that love would not be enough to protect us." Those words stayed between them. Ethan looked away, remembering all the nights he wondered what he had done wrong. Now he realized there was no simple answer. They had both been hurt by circumstances neither of them fully understood. For the first time in years, they were not 2 people separated by silence. They were 2 people finally seeing the same story from different sides. Noah reached into his wallet and pulled out a small, worn photograph. It was old, slightly faded, but carefully protected. Ethan recognized it immediately. It was from the summer when they first admitted they loved each other. "I kept this the entire time," Noah said. Ethan looked at the photograph, then back at Noah. The person in front of him was not someone who had forgotten him. He was someone who had been trying to survive without him. And in that moment, Ethan understood something important. Sometimes people leave not because love disappears, but because they believe leaving is the only way to save the person they love most. After the truth finally came into the open, Ethan Whitmore and Noah Bennett found themselves standing in a place neither of them expected to be. They were no longer strangers separated by 7 years of silence. But they were not the same 2 people who had once believed love alone could solve every problem. Time had changed them. Ethan had learned how to live with disappointment. Noah had learned how to hide his own pain behind a calm smile. Now, they had to discover whether the connection they once shared could survive the weight of everything they had lost. In the days that followed, Ethan did not pressure Noah for answers. He understood that 7 years of distance could not disappear in one conversation. Instead, he started with small moments. A morning coffee, a walk through the old neighborhood, conversations that lasted a few minutes longer each day. Slowly, the silence between them became less uncomfortable. Noah began seeing the Ethan he remembered, but also a person who had grown stronger and more patient. The man in front of him was no longer the young man who waited for someone else to decide his future. Ethan had built a life, created stability, and learned that love required more than promises. It required understanding. One afternoon, they visited the bookstore where everything had started. The shelves had been rearranged, and the walls had a fresh coat of paint, but the feeling remained the same. Noah ran his fingers across the old wooden counter and smiled. "I cannot believe this place is still here," he said. Ethan smiled back. "I almost closed it a few years ago." Noah looked surprised. "Why did you not?" Ethan looked around the store before answering. "Because I realized some things are worth keeping, even when they remind you of something you lost." Noah understood the meaning behind those words. For years, he believed leaving meant Ethan would eventually move on. He thought distance would make the memories fade. But now he saw that some connections did not disappear simply because people were apart. They waited quietly, hoping for another chance. As they walked through the streets of Portland, Noah finally shared more about the years they spent apart. He told Ethan about the nights when he wanted to call, but stopped himself. He told him about the moments when he almost returned but convinced himself that staying away was the right thing to do. "I thought if I came back, you would hate me," Noah admitted. Ethan looked at him with sadness. "I never hated you, Noah. I hated not knowing why." Those words stayed with Noah. The greatest pain had never been losing Ethan. It had been believing that he no longer deserved to find his way back. But Ethan's patience slowly challenged that belief. He was not asking Noah to forget the past. He was asking him to stop carrying it alone. For the first time in years, Noah allowed himself to imagine a future that was not built around running away. However, healing old wounds was not simple. There were still questions they needed to answer. There were still people from their past who had shaped their choices. There were still fears that appeared whenever Noah remembered the words that once made him believe his happiness was something to hide. Ethan noticed those moments. He noticed when Noah became quiet. He noticed when old doubts returned. And instead of asking him to be different, Ethan simply reminded him of one thing. "You do not have to disappear anymore." Those words became the beginning of something new. Not a return to the past, but a chance to create something better. Because this time, they would not build their relationship on fear or secrets. They would build it on honesty, patience, and the courage to choose each other again. For the first time in 7 years, Ethan Whitmore and Noah Bennett were no longer trying to understand each other from a distance. They were finally sitting in the same room, having the conversations they once thought would never happen. But as the days passed, Ethan realized that discovering the truth was only the beginning. Understanding Noah's choice was one thing. Accepting how much pain they had both carried was another. Noah had spent years believing that leaving was the only way to protect Ethan. But Ethan slowly began to see that Noah had also been protecting the people who had convinced him to disappear. He had carried everyone's expectations, everyone's fears, and everyone's opinions until he forgot that his own happiness mattered too. One evening, while they sat at the same small coffee shop they used to visit years ago, Ethan asked a question he had avoided for a long time. "Did you ever regret loving me?" Noah looked at him with surprise. It was not the question he expected. After everything they had been through, he thought Ethan would ask why he left or why he never came back. But Ethan wanted to know if their love had ever been a mistake in Noah's heart. Noah looked down at his coffee cup, remembering all the years he spent trying to convince himself to move on. "No," he finally answered. "I regretted that I was not brave enough to stay. I regretted hurting you, but I never regretted loving you." Those words gave Ethan the answer he had been searching for since the day Noah disappeared. The pain had never come from the love they shared. It came from losing the chance to choose each other openly. But as they continued talking, another truth began to appear. Noah was not the only one who had changed. Ethan realized he had spent years holding on to the version of Noah from their past. The young man who laughed easily, who dreamed about the future, and who believed everything would work out. He had forgotten that Noah had lived through difficult moments without him. Noah was not the same person who left. He was someone who had survived years of uncertainty and learned how to stand on his own. Ethan wanted to protect him, but he understood that Noah did not need someone to save him. He needed someone who would stand beside him. That realization changed everything. A few days later, Ethan and Noah returned to the neighborhood where they had first met. The streets looked smaller than they remembered, but the memories remained powerful. They stopped outside the old bookstore, watching people walk by and listening to the familiar sounds of the town. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if I never left?" Noah asked. Ethan thought about the question carefully. Years ago, he would have answered immediately. He would have said they would have been happy. But now he understood life was more complicated than that. "I think we would have faced challenges," Ethan said. "But I also think we deserve the chance to face them together." Noah smiled sadly because that was the future he had always wanted. Not a perfect life without problems. Just a life where they did not have to hide from each other. That night, Noah finally opened the old box he had kept hidden for years. Inside were small reminders of the past. A handwritten note from Ethan. A photograph from their first summer together. A simple bookmark they had made while spending an afternoon at the bookstore. Ethan looked at those memories and realized something important. Noah had never truly left their story behind. He had only paused it because he believed continuing would hurt the person he loved. But now, the story was moving again. The past could not be changed. The years they lost could not be returned. But for the first time, both of them understood that healing was not about forgetting what happened. It was about accepting the truth and choosing what came next. And this time, neither Ethan nor Noah wanted to run away from it. The days that followed brought a quiet change into Ethan Whitmore and Noah Bennett's lives. Nothing happened all at once. There was no single moment when every fear disappeared or every painful memory became easy to accept. Instead, healing came through small choices. A conversation that lasted a little longer. A smile that felt natural again. A moment where neither of them felt the need to explain or apologize. For the first time in years, Ethan and Noah were learning how to exist in the same space without the weight of the past controlling every moment. But they both knew there was one part of their story they could not avoid forever. The people and beliefs that had shaped Noah's decisions 7 years earlier were still part of his life. And before Noah could truly move forward, he needed to stop carrying the shame that had never belonged to him. One weekend, Noah received a message from his family. They wanted to meet. For a moment, he felt the same uncertainty he had felt years ago. The same feeling that told him to step back, stay quiet, and avoid conflict. Ethan noticed the change in his expression. "You do not have to face this alone," Ethan said. Noah looked at him and smiled softly. "That is what I always wanted to hear." Together, they traveled to the town where Noah grew up. It was a place filled with memories, both good and painful. The old neighborhood streets looked exactly as Noah remembered them. The same houses, the same trees, the same places where he once dreamed about a future he was afraid to choose. When Noah arrived at his family's home, he realized something important. The people inside were not the same either. Time had changed everyone. His family had spent years thinking about the choices they made. They had seen Noah build a life away from them. They had watched him become someone kind, responsible, and respected. They had slowly begun to understand that the happiness they once feared was actually the thing that helped Noah become his best self. The conversation was difficult, but it was honest. Noah finally said the words he had kept inside for years. He explained that leaving Ethan was not a decision made because he was ashamed of love. It was a decision made because he was afraid. He was afraid of disappointing everyone. He was afraid of being judged. He was afraid that choosing himself would mean losing the people he cared about. Ethan stayed beside him, not speaking for him, not trying to control the moment. He simply showed Noah that support did not always mean fighting someone's battles. Sometimes it meant standing beside them while they found their own voice. Noah's family listened. They did not have every answer. They could not erase the years that had passed, but they finally understood the pain their expectations had caused. For Noah, that moment was not about proving anyone wrong. It was about finally releasing the burden he had carried for so long. Later that evening, Ethan and Noah walked through the quiet streets together. The air was cool, and the town lights reflected across the sidewalks. Noah stopped and looked at Ethan. "I spent so much time thinking I had to choose between love and everyone else," he said. Ethan smiled gently. "You should never have had to choose between being loved and being yourself." Those words stayed with Noah. For years, he believed he had to run to protect the people around him. But now he understood something different. True love did not ask him to disappear. True love allowed him to exist completely. And for the first time in a very long time, Noah felt like he was finally home. After returning to Portland, Ethan Whitmore and Noah Bennett felt a new sense of peace. But they both understood that rebuilding their relationship required more than simply remembering the good moments. They had spent years apart, and those years had shaped them into different people. The love between them was still there, but now they had the chance to build something stronger, something based on honesty instead of fear. Noah no longer wanted to be the person who disappeared whenever life became difficult. He wanted to learn how to stay. For Ethan, that was the change he had hoped for since the day Noah left. Not a perfect apology. Not a way to erase the past. Just the choice to face the future together. As the weeks passed, their connection slowly returned. They visited familiar places, discovered new ones, and created memories that belonged to the present instead of only the past. Ethan took Noah to the bookstore after closing hours, where they sat between the shelves and talked for hours like they used to. Noah helped Ethan organize the old collection of books, laughing when he found handwritten notes they had left years earlier. These small moments reminded them that their story had never been only about the separation. It had also been about the kindness, trust, and understanding they had shared from the beginning. But Noah still carried one fear he had not completely overcome. He worried that one day Ethan would realize the years they lost were too much to forgive. One evening, while they walked beside the river near downtown Portland, Noah finally admitted what had been on his mind. "Sometimes I still wonder if you are only here because you remember who I used to be." Ethan stopped walking and looked at him. "Noah, I am here because I know who you are now." Those words meant more than Noah expected. For so long, he had believed he needed to become someone else to deserve happiness. But Ethan reminded him that love was not about being perfect. It was about being seen completely and still being chosen. A few days later, Ethan brought Noah to the bookstore after closing. The lights were warm, and the quiet room felt like the place where their story began. Ethan had prepared something simple. On a small table was a collection of memories from their years apart. Not to focus on the sadness, but to recognize everything they had survived. There were old photographs, letters that were never sent, and little reminders of moments they thought they had lost forever. Noah looked at everything and felt overwhelmed by the realization that Ethan had never forgotten him. "I do not want us to spend the rest of our lives trying to recover the past," Ethan said. "I want us to create something new." Noah looked at him, and for the first time, he did not feel the need to run. He did not feel the need to explain why he was afraid. He simply allowed himself to believe that he was allowed to be happy. The next morning, Noah returned to the bookstore with a different feeling in his heart. The same place that once reminded him of everything he lost now represented everything he had found again. He understood that courage was not the absence of fear. Courage was choosing love even when fear was still present. Ethan and Noah knew there would still be challenges ahead. Life would not suddenly become effortless, but they had learned something important. The strongest relationships were not the ones that never faced difficulties. They were the ones where two people continued choosing each other, even after everything they had been through. And this time, when Noah looked at Ethan, he did not see a reason to leave. He saw a reason to stay. 1 year later, Ethan Whitmore still remembered the day Noah Bennett walked back into his life. At the time, he thought the hardest part would be finding the truth. He thought the pain of 7 years apart would be the biggest challenge they would ever face. But as the seasons changed, Ethan learned that the most meaningful part of their journey was not discovering what had been lost. It was learning how to appreciate what they had found again. Their life together was not built on pretending the past never happened. Instead, they carried those memories with them, knowing every difficult moment had shaped who they had become. Noah continued working as a teacher in Seattle, Washington, but he often visited Portland on weekends. Ethan expanded the bookstore, creating a small reading area where people could gather, share stories, and feel welcome. It became a place that reflected everything they believed in, a place where nobody had to hide who they were. On quiet mornings, Ethan would open the bookstore before sunrise, preparing coffee while sunlight slowly filled the room. Noah would arrive carrying a stack of books he wanted to recommend to students, and Ethan would smile because some things never changed. Noah still became excited when he discovered a new story. Ethan still loved watching him talk about the things that mattered to him. Their happiness was not found in grand moments. It lived in ordinary ones. A shared breakfast before a busy day. A walk through the neighborhood while discussing small plans for the future. A simple conversation at the end of the evening about everything and nothing. They had once believed they needed to fight the world to prove their love was real. Now they understood something different. Their love did not need to be proven. It needed to be lived. Noah often thought about the person he had been 7 years earlier. The young man who believed disappearing was the only way to protect the person he loved. He wished he could go back and tell that younger version of himself one thing. Fear might feel powerful, but it should never be allowed to decide your entire life. Ethan had a similar reflection. For years, he wondered why Noah left. He searched for answers in every memory, every conversation, every moment they shared before the separation. But eventually, he stopped asking why the past happened and started appreciating what the future could become. On a quiet evening, the two of them sat outside the bookstore, watching the lights of Portland shine across the street. Noah rested his hand on the old wooden table they had repaired together, remembering all the years they thought they had lost. "Do you ever think about what our lives would have been like if we had never been apart?" Noah asked. Ethan smiled. "Sometimes. But I think we became stronger because we learned how important it is to choose each other." Noah looked around at the bookstore, the warm lights, and the life they had created. He realized that home was not a place where everything was perfect. Home was where he could finally be honest, understood, and accepted. Years ago, he thought running away would protect his heart. Now he knew staying was the bravest choice he had ever made. Their future was still unfolding. There would be new challenges, new dreams, and new memories waiting for them. But they no longer faced tomorrow with fear. They faced it together. And in the quiet moments that mattered most, Ethan and Noah found the happiness they once thought they had lost forever. Not in a perfect story without struggles, but in a real one filled with patience, forgiveness, and the simple promise that they would continue choosing each other, one day at a time.